Rena and I decided a couple weeks ago that we wanted to initiate these conversations as a way of exploring the changes that we see, the experiences that are so different and potentially transformational at this time. So this is the first one. We hope more people will gather in the future. We whatever we share, please take it for however you want to receive it, right? So if it doesn't feel right to you or it doesn't feel true and you want to just set it aside or put it in a box and look at it later or discard it completely, like that's absolutely fine. We will be talking from our own perspectives and our own belief systems. And of course, all belief systems are welcome. So, um, uh, and what we thought we would um, tap into today specifically was, finding the joy, finding the love of what we do every day, and tapping into that. And it feels to me like this time of pause and stillness for everyone. Everyone's sort of been forced to go indoors, right? To retreat from the external world. And that retreat from the external world is really such a gift because rather than just reacting to our external environment all the time, we have this opportunity to really settle in and figure out what we want, what we desire. Where does our joy come from? What do we want to joyfully create for ourselves and our community, um, without having to constantly react, right? Like it feels like I'm, in the midst of helping to manage the Teal Center and seeing my clients, I'm often just like going, going, going. And this is a wonderful retreat. So talking about finding the love of what we do again, Rena has recently had a great retreat and experienced some insight into this. Rena, do you want to talk about it?
When you started talking, what came to mind was, really it's a process that, like you said, like you're managing the Teal Center and you're trying to see clients. And like when it first all happened, it was almost like, oh, there's all these things we got to do now. Like, okay, we got to shift. All these, like, just like there was like this energy of trying to figure it out. Um, and it really took a while for us all to kind of find some kind of a stream. And then I talk from my experience with talking to other people about it as well. And I feel like, so I did a retreat this last week with heart-based meditation, which is one of my meditation teachers. And we talked a lot about going to your heart. And I really felt that how have I not, like I've missed joy and happiness in my life. Like I really had gotten to a place where I was doing a lot of things because, it's good for me. Like, yes, I should meditate, and I did feel good about it. And there's other practices I do. But there wasn't this excitement about it in my life. There wasn't like, hey, I want to get up in the morning because I love getting up in the morning. It was like, I should be getting up in the morning because that's the best time to meditate.
Mm.
So it's kind of interesting. Like this morning too, I was sitting here and looking outside, and it's all about perspective. Like nothing really changed in my life. Everything is still the same, but I had this deep inner peace because I'm happy with myself. I think that's really what it comes down to, being happy with ourselves. And that's kind of like when the outside things have been taken away, going inward and finding that peace from inside is what really can make a difference for us as we go forward in our lives.
And so how do we find that peace, right? How do we shift our perspective like you did through your retreat and through meditation this last week? How do we shift our perspective to move from I think our belief system, which is rooted in our collective consciousness, right? There's so many beliefs that underpin our thoughts. And I think the vast majority of our thoughts are habitual thoughts, right? Like we don't have a lot of new thoughts every day. And those habitual thoughts come from our belief systems and the collective belief system of our community and our country and the world, right? And so allowing ourselves the space to step outside of those beliefs, like the belief that we are just a physical body having this physical experience, right? When we can step into the belief that actually, no, like I am a spiritual being living many, many lifetimes, and this is just one small piece of my eternal existence. And so, wow, you know, what does that open up in my thought pattern? That opens up the possibility that, like, I can create anything, right? Like I can step outside the boundaries of what I think society and my conditioned expectations are of myself, and I can create anything. And so what do I want to create? So I think part of it for me, like I've been trying to practice lately, trying to do like one thing different every day, just one little thing, right? So it might be, instead of waking up in the morning and immediately going and having my cup of tea and doing my, you know, thing on the computer, like I step outside instead and I just breathe in the fresh air and listen to the birds, right? I mean, it doesn't have to be a big thing, but just trying to do a little bit of something new just starts to shift the gears, I think, in our brain, in our neurology, in our body, and in our thoughts. Yeah.
So I would say the way we decided to do this setup for this was like, we're gonna have it's like us having a conversation. So we don't have a, you know, a script for following. So when you said that, the thing came to me when you were talking about, like, I'm a person and all of a sudden I'm realizing this is not my only life and I'm something else. The first thing comes to mind for me, I'm like, fear. Like, that's scary.
Okay.
That's not what it's like for, but I have a point after the fear.
Yeah.
But that was my first thought. I was like, I mean, when I was going through on this process, I remember when I first started meditating, sitting down to meditate for 5 minutes, I thought I was going to die at minute 2.5. Like, I had so many like bodily sensations that I hadn't tapped in my whole life, and I was just like it was just too much to deal with. And this was, and I had already become a massage therapist. I'd already gone to massage school. It was like after, or yeah, it was like right around that time. And I think like so I feel like we do have to, yes, make the changes. And I think that's like going outside is so important. And so I've also been doing that. It's really cool, like really grounding. But like, what is that fear? Like taking time to really be like, what is it that I'm really afraid of? And the fear of, like, when I was like, it's almost like when I was first confronted with it, was like fear of it, losing my identity, because we all are in some ways really rooted into our, like, this is me, this is Rena, I am a massage therapist, I own these things, and this is my perspective. And then when you realize that's not who you are, it's like, whoa, who am I? So going kind of through that, and there is a lot of inner work with that. Like, what is it that I'm really afraid of? Like, I'm afraid of losing me, the identity of me, like, and then going from there, and what is the identity of me, or what is the identity of me and really mean for me? But I think it also comes down to like fear of death, like death of me, death of this body. Like, fear of death is usually the biggest fear that we all have to face. And in some ways, the spiritual realms, like you said, when we come to realization and understanding that this is only a blip in the ocean, that we're all going to die. The trees die every fall, and it's you know, it's a sad in some ways, but a true reality how life operates. And I think when we come to a little bit of an understanding and acceptance of death every day, like our body dies every day, parts of our body die every day. Like we regenerate our body every, I don't know how many times, but like who my
For
body,
7 years.
yeah, like my physical molecules in my body are not the same like they were 7 years ago. This is a whole new arena. So what is really going to die when I die? Like this is already dying. It's going to be gone in 7 years and there'll be another thing.
Yeah.
When we think of death, it's just our soul moving on to somewhere else to do some other things.
Yeah, and I think it's very natural to feel that that wanting to hold on to this form, right, into this life, because
Yeah.
we came here for, I think, every incarnation that we have, we come into it with great purpose, right? And we don't have, once we come into the body, I feel like we don't necessarily have full insight into what that purpose is. And it's a process of discovery and growth and, you know, challenge. But
Where is my owner's manual?
but I think every time we come in, there's a blending that happens. And I just read this beautiful book by Fred, oh no, that's a different book I'm reading now, called Journey of Souls. And I can't remember the name of the author right now, but he's a hypnotherapist and he, you know, practiced for decades, and he discovered people started going to the space of their consciousness that they experienced between lives. And so he started intentionally taking people into that space. And he spent a couple of decades of working with clients and taking them into the space that they existed in between physical incarnations. And it's really beautiful and remarkable what came forward through that, which there was a lot of commonalities, and I'm not going to go into all of those experiences here, but I bring that up to say that it was clear that there's great intention for every time we manifest, and that there's a blending that happens between our soul and our physical body. And it starts when we're in the womb, in utero, right? But it continues. And it's this beautiful marriage of spirit and matter. And that's what we're doing here. We're creating a new manifestation of divinity through the infusion of God energy with physical form, with matter, with biology, with carbon and oxygen and hydrogen and nitrogen, right? And I think there's so much beauty in that, but we end up getting a little bit stuck in expectation and in these false beliefs about who we are. And it's the false beliefs about who we are that then create these levels of fear in our society. And I think just talking about them like this through this forum, I think for me, it helps me to integrate sort of the truth of what I want to represent in the world, rather than just a reactionary fear-based response.
I think it's really beautiful, Crystal. I really love how you said that's what like causes the fear, us being too stuck in the carbon and the molecules, and which is also God's creation. It's all God's
Right, right.
I'm wondering if our two audience members have any questions or like something that came up to them that they as they were listening to us talking. Carl is talking and we can't hear you.
You're muted, Carl.
There we go. Well, I didn't see you before, Brenda. Hi to you too. It's good
Hi,
to see
Carl.
It's great to see all three of you.
It's nice to see you too.
Thanks. It's interesting. I've retired 6 years ago, and of course, up to then, pretty much my life was pretty regular. And I've had three things that have happened, this situation being the third, that have been since then, that have been kind of like I had to stop and reassess what was really important to me. When I started out, I got into I'm a musician. I got into being in a band and doing performances for people. And about a year and a half in, I got some kind of really horrible um, nerve damage in my left arm, and I couldn't play guitar. And so I had to say, okay, I need to find, and it took it took almost a year to work itself out. Although I could slowly get back into playing guitar, and I had to reassess like which things are really important to me that I'm doing, and how am I going to help provide entertainment for people without playing guitar, whether it's just going in and singing to them without a guitar, or getting friends to play, or finding other activities, because I love to volunteer and bring joy to people that way. And then that got better. And then like a year or two later, at the same time, we got my dad to agree to move down here to live at Goodwin House, and I needed a pacemaker, which I'm fine after that. It's in fact better, but I had to literally stop everything for like 6 weeks. I wasn't allowed to, carry things and do all kinds of stuff. And again, another reassessment, and this is yet another reassessment. And it's tough in a lot of ways, because I really am frustrated by not being able to get together with the people, because I know how much it means to all of us. But we're doing online stuff, and I decided very early on, I run a sing-along group monthly at a community center. I decided early on to play disc jockey and pick songs that had themes that related in one way to the situation, and email them with encouraging messages, and if I could throw a few jokes in or pictures. And people like that, and I've expanded the list, so like 70 people are getting it now. And so that made me feel a lot better. And a lot of people said, oh, thank you so much for just letting us know there's somebody out there who's thinking of us. So it's been good. It's been good that way. And then I rediscovered our backyard. I've sat out here more and just taken in the air and listened to the birds and watched the chipmunks than I have maybe in the whole 30-something years we've owned the house. So it's, it is, I tell people it's an opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
What you were saying is just right. We were all afraid of losing ourselves. But who are we? There's something that we all have to offer, and something that we're comfortable doing. And I agree, getting out of the routine. I go out for walks at like 11 o'clock or midnight now, which I hadn't done in decades. And it's so peaceful, and I see like sometimes the neighborhood rabbits are scampering around in the dark, and it's really cool.
It's very cool.
And that's what, like that's the other point of like, this is such a blessing in many ways.
That way it is, yeah.
For us all to take, like you said, this is the third time, and you're really getting into it, and it's such an opportunity to re-look at our lives. And we are really moving from this, like me and Crystal were talking about, like astrologically, it doesn't even matter which astrologer you talk to. Everybody will tell you pretty much similar versions of how we're changing from this other age into this new age, where my teacher specifically talked about how, before the knowledge would come, so this is going to be a little longer story. Back in the day, the spiritual teachers were all about like, you need to ascend the body, and we want to use the body as a way to get enlightened, so we could be this happy, peaceful soul that we know we're at. But we're really we don't really care about the body too much. It's just like a vehicle. We don't, like, the body has desires. We don't necessarily need to care what the desires about. Just like work hard and get to enlightenment. That's the life goal. Especially like in monks and things like that. Whereas now we're moving to an age where the enlightenment, so in Vedic astrology, it's called the Aquarius age, and the Aquarius symbol is like a pouring. There's a water basket being poured. So the knowledge is poured into us. So there isn't necessarily something we need to strive for, like it comes through us. We don't necessarily even need to look for teachers or like go to a monastery for 10 years and, you know, not eat food for 5 days out of the 7 days of the week or something. There's no need for that anymore. But we do need to do some things like meditation and like just such a gift of quietness of the world to be able to go into our minds and our bodies and see what our truth is. And everybody's truth is going to be totally different. Carl's truth is going to be different from mine. You know, he wants to share the joy through the music and like discover his backyard or whatever it is. And it's different for everybody. But realizing that whatever the truth is for you is so right for you. And that's coming back to the loop of like finding your happiness within it yourself. But meditation is definitely a key of finding where that happiness is for you, from my perspective.
That's great, Rena. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, that's the sort of the Hindu sort of perspective or Ayurvedic perspective, right? And I think there are parallels too, like in the Christian tradition. I mean, I think that Christ was a way shower of exactly what you're talking about, of the realization of our direct connection to source, and that we really are we are powerful beings of creative energy that we inherited from our source, right? And that all we have to do is surrender to ourselves, really, to surrender and open up to receive our own natural intelligence, our own wisdom from within our hearts, from connecting inside, and being guided by that, right? And that's how we begin to manifest the joy of what we create. And I think a lot of people have fear of doing that because the idea that we are fully responsible for our reality drives a lot of people into the ego mind, where there's like, oh my God, what did I do? I created this terrible reality for myself where I don't have enough money, or I'm in a bad relationship, or whatever it is. And so there's this like loop of unworthy, like beliefs in our own unworthiness and self-judgment for what we've created, rather than realizing that if we've created something that we don't want, it's to maybe show us what we do want. Or if we've created something that we don't want, it wasn't done with any intention. It was done because we weren't setting intentions. You know, it was just done because our thoughts are chaotic and are rooted in, you know, fear and lack or worry about the future. And so what we're actually creating is just chaotic intention that runs back and forth between what we don't want and what we do want. Hi, Kim. So, you know, how do we create for ourselves as these powerful beings? You know, how do we empower ourselves to create what we really truly want and want to desire and we'll find joy in? That would be a whole nother session. But I think that would be one that would be fun to explore as well. Brenda, did you have any thoughts or reactions to this?
Oh, this is such a big subject.
It is.
Yeah, I think in my life experience, it's been the troublesome times that have served as to create an imperative to look inside and figure out, well, what am I supposed to do now? You know, and that usually was a Kickstarter toward doing something differently, and maybe discovering a gift or a talent that I could use to express my my gifts, you know, to express what I have to do in this life. For instance, I was brought up to believe that all I needed to do was go to college so I could get a job if I needed it to support myself in case that really good husband that you find at college dies or something. Then, you know, you won't be up the creek without a paddle. But number one imperative was to find a partner so you would be well taken care of. And what my material life taught me was that if you're a good girl, you'll get what you need, you know? Well, by the time I was 30, I had fulfilled those expectations and discovered that that didn't work. You know? I've been being as good as I knew how to be, and it just all fell apart. So clearly there was something else. And that crisis created the necessity for me to dig down and figure out what I could do. You know, what were my individual personal strengths and gifts, and how could I survive was number one. But in that surviving, I was able to apply some gifts that I wasn't accessing at all in that life of, you know, creating a home and family. That was what I was brought up, you know, to expect, that that's what I would do with my life. And you know what? I imagined I managed to do that, to create a home and family, in addition to creating things beyond that expected reality, but only because the original incomplete application of my gifts fell apart and required me to discover more. If that makes sense. So then I went on to do my professional work, which has been, you know, extremely gratifying. Now I feel like it's time for something more, something else, and I have to discover what that is, because it's still unknown.
Sorry. Like, I feel like it's such a deep change that it's going to take us a little bit of time to really figure out what it is. Like, it's so deep.
Yeah, I mean, astrologically, what I had heard through an astrologer, I think astrology happens in different cycles as well. So the age of Aquarius is one cycle, but that the Earth itself is moving through its cycles, and we were moving out of. So in about 1860, we entered the Earth entered what was the age of Taurus, which is an Earth sign. And you know, you could think about like the physical manifestation, the energy for physical creation was very prominent, right? Like the Industrial Revolution, I mean, and everything that we've seen that has developed on the world since then. You know, the use of minerals and oil and gas to create our physical world. And now in December of this year, December 2020, the world is moving into the age of Gemini, I think it is, which is an air sign. And so that's going to be moving us from the very sort of focus on the physical world into the unseen, like the more etheric world of, you know, we'll move away from oil and gas towards solar and wind power. We'll move, you know, from, you know, the things that are seen and felt to maybe the things that are unseen, or, you know, we'll be able to more easily access the world around us in the sixth sense kind of way, right? Like it'll be easier to access the unseen, and it'll be the age of sort of like energy medicine. And I mean, the internet has already sort of moved us in the direction of being able to connect with people and feel that connection happening even when we're not physically present with one another. And I think we'll even be taking that further in the coming months and years. And I just think that's really interesting, because I feel like this time of pause and reset is to help us make that transition with actually less pain than we would have made it otherwise, even though that seems maybe a bit of a contradiction, because I know a lot of people are experiencing a lot of pain and challenges right now. But I think as a collective, I think it's very intentionally moving us into the new era and the new age in a more graceful way, is what it feels like.
Yeah, I feel like this is just the beginning. But it's the beginning place, like Brenda's saying, like, what is the next thing? We don't necessarily know yet, right?
Nobody. We don't. But we trust, right?
Well, I think the key is to just be open. Just sit in the dark and wait.
Be comfortable with
hear the voice that has no words.
Yeah.
So I have two practical things to say to that. How is it that I do that, right? So knowing, and whatever religion or belief you come or don't come from, that you are always safe with yourself, and there's always grace. So even if you look back at your life, you can probably see grace going through it in some point or another. So as we're going through this process, kind of giving to ourselves that wherever we are being guided, and there's grace for us to this work, whatever this work is. And like Brenda said, like to sit with yourself, to really take time to either learn a meditation technique that you usually or always use or often use, or just sit with yourself and, diary, journal, but not from a place of like ranting about how everything is horrible in my life. and maybe that's where it starts from, and that's what we need to express, but asking the questions of like, what is it that I really want, and how do I really feel, and like really diving deeper into the whys and hows of ourselves to discover what's really happening.
Yeah, because to come back to it, your answers are going to come from within, not from without, right?
Yeah.
Well, I think one of the big blessings of what's going on, we're seeing a lot of possibilities that never would have happened without this virus. The fact that the air is a lot cleaner and people are getting along without cars. I've gone 2 or 3 days at a time without using my car, which is something that was kind of unthinkable unless I was really sick in the last several years. And people are relying on each other more. And so it's, these are good signs that people can take and do what they can with them, and it would have happened otherwise. Our neighbors have great kids on both sides of us, and they may be listening, and I've told them that before, but I'm getting to see them day to day growing up in ways I wouldn't have seen them if they were off at school and I was doing my things. So there's all kinds of great stuff going on, and hopefully we can keep some of this going. And then thinking about the future, I remember when I was a kid and I would be like 10 years old and 65, and I would think, well, in 45 years is going to be the year 2000, the 21st century. What's life going to be like? And it was interesting to see how it turned out. If you remember the Jetsons, or stuff like that, most of the thought was that we'd be basically flying instead of driving, but communications wasn't really seen that communications would take off. At the 64 World's Fair, which I went to a lot because we lived like 10 minutes away in Queens, they had picture phone. And the Bell System booth had picture phone, which we tried. And it was 2 little crummy looking TVs, and you could barely, even though I guess they both were hooked up to closed circuit. and you could the person was like 3 feet away, but you could barely hear them or see them. And we thought, oh my God, like if we talk to grandma, we have to smile and things like that. Although I love my grandmothers, they were great. But and now, but so it went the other way, where technology changed the world. And travel really hasn't changed all that much. So who knew? So one of the things that bothers me about the idea of dying is that I always think, how's this story going to progress? I mean, I was a history major and a lawyer, and I think, well, what would the people who wrote the Constitution think of us and how we're applying it? Well, what will will there be a Constitution in 100 or 200 years? What will our country? I'm sorry I won't get to see that, but maybe I will. I don't know. At least probably is the way I am right now. I won't see it, but who knows?
Yeah.
But it is inevitable. I mean, and this also teaches us that a lot of people try to plan for how they'll go out, and they're going to have a party here, or they're going to ease off the medications, or they're going to do something. And we see how little control we have over all of that. And
Absolutely.
that's probably a good lesson.
Yeah.
We don't want it, but right now, but it's probably a good lesson.
That's a huge one. This, the allowing, and I think this is where we can find the love in what we're doing, right? Because we don't know what will come next. And we just surrender and trust that whatever I'm experiencing is exactly what I need to be experiencing, even if it feels very painful in the moment. I mean, I went through a period of transformation when we moved to Spain, and I had left my job and my community and my friends. And for the first time, I moved to a new place where I wasn't working at the embassy. So I was no longer with the State Department. And it was really difficult. Like I didn't have a network. I didn't know anybody. I didn't know the language. And surprisingly, very few people in Madrid, Spain speak English. So it was really, really tough to make connections and to not feel isolated. And at the same time, I lost a lot of my identity as a productive member of society, right? And it sucked. I mean, it was not comfortable, and I went through a lot of grief, really. And I think the grief that I was going through was sort of shedding the ideas of myself and who I'm supposed to be, and releasing all of that was not fun. So sometimes releasing the things that have formed us into the person we are, not that we have to do this at all, because at the core of who we are, there's truth, right? But I was shedding false beliefs about who I was, right? I was shedding the idea that I had to do something to be valuable, right? And it was really painful, and I never want to have to go through that again. But I came out on the other side feeling like, oh, I am worthy. I am of value, regardless of what I do or don't do. I can just sit in a state of beingness and feel the value of that. And that helped me to find joy in the everyday aspects of my life too, right? By releasing I should do this. I need to be doing something else. I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing. Letting all of that go was part of my journey for sure. Just like yours, Brenda.
That is so key. This is the most important part. It doesn't matter what we do or how much we do. This whole we have to do thing. And that regardless of that, we are still so worthy and so loved by everybody in our life, really, if we even ask them, and ourselves. And when we come to realize that, joy. So beautiful.
Yeah. Thank you.
Brenda, I really appreciate your story. My mom when I was about 7 or 8, my mom, who had, she had her BA and she had been a social worker, and she stopped doing that when my brother and I were born. But I can remember as a little kid, she was very unhappy. And she decided to go back to grad school and got her MSW. And it was good for everybody. She was more fulfilled, and we got to know my dad better. My dad was a great guy who worked really hard and really long hours, but he put aside some of his hours to, bring food home, or we would make real simple meals and laugh about it if we burned things. And it was great. It was great for everybody. And my mom worked as a social worker. That was her psychiatric social worker. That was her career. And she was obviously much happier after that. And it also gave me an appreciation that everybody needs to do what makes them feel fulfilled. And hey, anybody who ever said to me that women should just stay home and have kids, I'm the biggest proponent that we need everybody's contribution. Whatever they choose to do, it's like we let, it would be like letting all the iron in the ground, have the iron in the ground stay in the ground and not use it, to tell people they can't do what they're good at and what they want to do and help other people. So I really appreciate your story. My dad, it's funny about identity. My dad, I had no trouble giving up being a lawyer at all. My dad had trouble with it. And when I would, he seemed to have trouble with me being like a guy who played music for nothing. And like every time I tell him that I played somewhere, he'd go, "Could you ask for tips? Did they give you a cookie?" I mean, it was just like an obsession with him. And I'm just like, "Dad, no, I'm doing what I love to do. You should." And you supported me and helped me have a career, and now I don't have to worry about it, and I can do what I really love. You should be happy. just like, "But you're not a lawyer anymore." I said, "Well, but I never was. I was me who happened to be a lawyer."
That's right. That's such the important part right there. Carl, thank you. So this was intended to be 45 minutes. We've already spent 45 minutes talking, and that was just lovely. I think we'll close for today. We're gonna gather like this, Rena and I, and introduce ideas to talk every other Saturday at this time. So if you're interested, the best way to get the Zoom link is to register on the Mind Body Teal Center page. So if you have any questions about that, let me know. Thank you for joining us.
And
Thank you.
This is share the information with anybody who thinks might be interested in having these conversations.
I hope to have at least 2 or 3, and maybe more people would be interested.
Okay,
This
Carl.
is great. It's great. Thanks so much.
Nice to connect with all of you. All right.
Sorry I was late. Very interesting discussion.
Okay, Kim.
Soon.
Kim.
Namaste, everybody.
Thank
Namaste.
you. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.